triad model, best practices, and this particular presentation takes place in schools, but it may be applicable to many different settings. And my name's Jen Von Lentel. I'm a school counselor at BF Kitchen Elementary School in Loveland, Colorado. We're a small title school. We have just about 200 students, and we've had an animal assisted intervention program for about the last 12 years or so. We work in both models. So both the triangle model you see in the picture there is Copper, my dog, and Toby. And they only come once or twice a week. And then on the other days, we bring in volunteers and work in the Diamond model. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. Our school district has worked with a wonderful organization named Havoc, and I'll let Kate introduce herself and talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Jen. So my name is Kate Miller, she, her pronouns, and I'm the animal trainer and volunteer coordinator at Havoc, which stands for Human Animal Bond in Colorado. We're a center in the School of Social Work at Colorado State University, and we train and sponsor therapy dogs to visit nursing homes and hospitals, and importantly, for schools as well. So we work pretty much exclusively with that Diamond model or triad model, which we'll get into a little bit in just a minute. And so we are really sort of providing or sponsoring volunteers with their own pet dogs to go out to schools and bring themselves and their dog to work alongside the educators to do this type of therapy work. I muted myself too soon. This is still me. So the Diamond model and the triad model, one in the same thing. So the idea here is that if you're looking at it as the Diamond model, there's 4 parties present, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if you're looking at it as the triad model, again, that's the same thing. The naming of that sort of comes from there's 3 people working with the student. So it would be the handler of the animal is 1, the animal is 2, the educator is 3, and all 3 of those folks are working together for the benefit of the one student. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jen.
Great. So there's a number of different reasons that we would like to integrate volunteer teams into our animal assisted programs in the school setting. The first is we're always looking at decreasing our risk. So when I'm focused on the student, that means that the handler of the dog can be focused on the dog, and that our insurance is also outside of our own organization. So in this case, Havoc has their own insurance, so the school district doesn't need to worry about those kind of risk management issues. It's also sometimes significantly less cost. So when I'm bringing my own dog in, I'm covering my own organization fees and pet bills and different certification costs, but working with an organization like Havoc, they have a very small cost that they ask the schools to pay on an annual basis. And sometimes if you work with other organizations like Pet Partners, they provide these services at no cost.
And I was going to jump in there and say that we were the recipients of an incredible donation that allowed us to remove that fee. So Havoc actually no longer asks for a fee to participate in the schools. So that's exciting news.
That is very exciting news, and I get to add some costs back to my budget now. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, depending on the organization, it could be a free cost, or there might be a small fee, just depending on who people are working with.
Fantastic. Okay, so our next bullet on this is that we can match team strengths to the student and the goals. So when I'm working with my own dog, he has his own strengths, and they don't always align beautifully with every student's goals. As an example, I worked with a dog who loved the active interactions, But a reading intervention goal where he's just sitting on the floor and listening was not his cup of tea. So this allows me to match dogs that have different preferences, maybe on students, some like older students, some like younger students, some enjoy more activity, some enjoy less activity. And handlers also have their preferences. So it really allows me to take a look at, okay, I've got these 5 volunteer teams and I've got these 5 students. Which team works best with each one of those students and the goals that they're working on? And let's see, and we have a reduced workload for the dogs working in the triangle model because these teams typically come in for just an hour a week. Whereas when I'm working with my dog in a school setting, I have to be very conscientious of his schedule and put in a number of breaks and be looking for his really the best times of the day for him to be doing certain interactions, like after lunch and recess. That might be a good time for a reading intervention because that's kind of his downtime. Or that might be a good time for him just to be alone in a room where he's got that quiet time. But when I'm working with the volunteer teams, they've already done all that work. They know what times are best for them. So they come in for that hour. We know that that's that dog's great working time. And then that dog can manage that other time in another way. And what I love too is that handlers, a lot of times they're retired and they may have some wonderful backgrounds for the work that you're doing. So for me, I've worked with some retired psychologists, some of the retired school counselors, other individuals in mental health. Some of the teams at our school actually have teachers that are retired that are bringing in their dogs. So those handlers can have some really valuable tools and know some wonderful ways to integrate that into interventions. Okay, this is just a poster this was a couple of years ago, but just the different volunteer teams that we had coming into our schools. So we had everything from Little Bug in the upper left-hand corner there with Andrea, a little Chihuahua, and not included on here, but we did have a wonderful Mirren, who's a Bernese Mountain Dog, big, huge, fluffy, dancing dog. So there's a wide variety of different teams and handlers that you can have. Kids love walking by this poster and knowing like which days different dogs are coming in and collecting different trading cards. That's a wonderful opportunity. In the lower left-hand corner, you might just see Buddy. He's actually our stuffed animal. So we work with him on students that we may not be sure if they know how to interact with a dog. So we practice with Buddy before introducing a live animal. Okay, so steps for integrating this work. We're going to start with just some foundational work. So within this foundational work, we're looking at obtaining AAI knowledge and skills. So many times you'll have an education professional, and they may not even have ever worked with a dog before or been around dogs. And so they really should have a good basic understanding of the human-animal bond and the research. Like, why exactly is this intervention working? What's happening within our brains, within the animals' brains that are making these changes, these positive changes happen? We want to understand and respond to canine body language. So they should have a good idea of how to read canine body language. Recognize that the handler is there to read all of those signals, but a lot of times if we also would like the education professional to understand basic canine body language. We want to be aware of requirements to obtain registration with therapy dog organizations. And this kind of helps offset the thinking of, well, I'm just going to bring my pet in, or my neighbor's just going to bring their dogs in. It is quite a process to become registered or certified with these different organizations. And we want to recognize, maybe even within their testing, what are some things that they test with? Are they looking at crowds of people, how big of a crowd of people do they test for, how many people interacting at a time. When we have a knowledge of that, then we kind of know, okay, within our interventions, this team is solid for 3 people interacting at a time.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there really quick too and say, for HABIC, we train to, relatively small groups, and there's been situations where we come to the school and maybe to get to the classroom, we have to walk through the gymnasium. And it might just happen to be PE time. And so there are students everywhere and basketballs and sort of a totally different environment than maybe we were anticipating. So just making sure that, if for some reason that dog was going to be incorporated into something like PE or recess or areas where there's many, many more students, maybe something like a passing period, being aware of those times as well. And just making sure, is this dog really equipped to handle a couple people at a time, being, a small crowd of people, or are they also really suitable for those bigger crowds like recess or something like that?
All right, and we also want to demonstrate proficiency with safety protocols. So some basic things like giving treats. There's organizations, each have their way of, if they do allow a student to provide a treat, very specific ways to follow those particular protocols. And then we also want to look at things like, what happens if there's a fire alarm? So having an idea in our head of, if we have, this event happen, what are we going to do if we have a volunteer team in the building, and how are we going to support them in those ways? So then things to think about before we bring teams into the building. Okay, and as an education professional, if you are an art teacher, or if you're a school counselor or a speech language pathologist or second grade teacher, high school history, have your classroom established, have your protocols established, and then consider adding on some animal-assisted interventions. It can be really difficult if this is your first year teaching and you want to integrate this, because it does add a number of complexities. So have a solid foundation in your work before considering adding animal-assisted interventions in. Okay, so completing a site assessment. So you've got this idea in your head like, oh, I'm going to add animal-assisted interventions at school. One of the first places to go is to the admin for your building and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I have seen a number of programs where if you don't have administrative support, things get shut down. We're very lucky in this next bullet that we're starting to see a number of districts with specific policies, so that the animals coming into the school do have to be registered with a therapy dog organization. They do have to provide the insurance and sign some documents going through like their background checks and that sort of thing. If you've got a policy in place, make sure you've reviewed it and you know what's on it so that you can follow it. And then be thinking about, where are you going to have this intervention? Is there going to be enough room for this intervention if you've got a beautiful Bernese Mountain Dog and 3 students in a small space? We've actually looked at a couple of different locations where we can do interventions just based on the number of people involved and the breed or the size of the dog. You'll want to look at entrance and exit routes. If you have some concerns at your school, or this is a brand new program at your school and there's still some hesitation, you may want to look at what's the closest door to the intervention room, what's the closest exit from the intervention room, so that you're really gathering data on just a handful of students and it's not impacting the whole school yet. And then once you see that great data, then you get more people on board and you can kind of look at expanding programs from there. The outdoor areas. So we have a no relief area that's pretty much our playground. And then at the front of the school, we have some fire hydrants, which are great relief areas for dogs. So identify those, make sure your handlers know where is the best area at your school to do that. And then off limits areas. So if you do have students that have aversions or allergies, you may be talking with their families, and their families may say, you know what, I don't want a dog in the classroom. So that would be an off-limit area. If you're serving lunch, then that would be a good off-limit area. So have your volunteers know which areas in your school are off-limits. Consideration for emergency events like those fire alarms, lockdown drills, those sort of things. What would you do if you had a therapy dog in the building during those times? And then getting school-wide support. So letting your staff know so that if they have any concerns, you can work them out. Let families know this is happening. So if they have any input, they can provide that, and make sure that everybody is feeling safe and welcome in your environment, and that they can express any of those concerns so you can put a plan in place. And inform the parents and guardians. I should read ahead in my bullet notes. Okay, so we are determining our mission and goals. So when you are looking at bringing a volunteer team in, why are you bringing your volunteer team in? Really, what is your mission going to be? You can tie this to your overall school goals or your overall district goals. Is attendance a big issue? Is reading a big issue? If you can really kind of define what objectives you're working on, then that will help you look for certain skill sets in those teams and really pick some wonderful teams to help with those specific areas. A lot of times I hear from people, I love dogs, they should be in the building. Not the best reason. Dogs are cute. Isn't a good reason to be bringing them in. Really be thinking about tying those goals into your work at school. Then you got to put a cute picture of a dog in there. Aw, just because you're really cute, we got to have a reason for you to come to school. Okay, so that's kind of your foundational work. Now we're going to look into finding these teams. So there are some therapy animal registries that have these systems in place. So Pet Partners is an example. You can get into online with them. You can almost post like a want ad saying, hey, we're interested in these teams. You can also look at different local groups. As an example, Havoc is a wonderful local group. And if I'm kind of reaching out in the community, I'll hear about, oh, well, we had a Havoc team here, or we had a Havoc team there. You can contact even local hospitals. Sometimes they have volunteer teams, and ask which organizations they're looking in. So kind of reaching out to your community or going online and doing an internet search may help uncover these different groups, and then it's just communicating with them on what you're really looking for. So things that you're really looking for in these groups too, because you may have like, you know, Gen V's therapy dogs extraordinaire, but if I'm not helping with insurance coverage and I don't have any insurance coverage, that's automatically our school won't work with them because we don't have the ability to cover that risk. Another thing that I'd be looking for is their evaluation requirements. If it's, I can walk on a leash and I'm not jumping up on people and that's it, then I'm going to say, you know what, we might want to have some more qualifications in place. Schools are really complex settings. And even if you're just coming in for an hour and then leaving, I want to make sure that that dog is comfortable and that handler has the skills to help with that really complex environment if things should change suddenly. And we always want to use positive training methods. I've had a team that came in for an interview and they were, you know, wearing like an e-collar. And it's very interesting how my students recognize that. And especially working with a population that has some significant trauma histories, that type of bond is not what we're looking for. We are looking for this positive reinforcement, talking to our dogs, that communication going back and forth. So that's something that we really look for. And lastly, those established protocols. So
I was just going to jump in really quick. So sorry,
yeah.
sorry, Jen. The animal trainer in me just has to speak to the positive reinforcement training methods a little bit too, because positive reinforcement is definitely a buzzword in the training community. And so I think almost everybody will say that they do use it. And I think sometimes what they mean is that they are doing sort of anything under the sun for training and also using treats in addition to that. But when we're saying positive training methods, we're really looking specifically at that positive reinforcement piece where, yes, treats and praise are part of it. And also we're not using some of those, harsher training methods like the e-collars or the pinch collars or, some of the really firm, harsh commands or scolding with the dogs. So if you ask people, they will likely say, yes, I do this whole positive thing. And I think you'll learn a lot more from observing the interactions with them and their dog.
Thank you. And then last, established protocols. And I'm actually going to turn that back over to you, Kate, because you can talk a little bit about HABIC's established protocols.
Absolutely. So dogs for us at HABIC are limited to 1 hour, and that is pretty common that you'll see. So the dogs are coming in working for 1 hour and then they get to go home. That could be different depending on the organization, but make sure you're aware of what some of those time limitations might be for the dogs. And then are treats allowed and who can give treats? At HABIC, we definitely do use a lot of treats and we encourage using a lot of treats. We also have a very specific way to give treats, but it really depends on the organization. So some organizations might say there's no treats that are allowed to be used at all in the intervention, or they might say treats can be used, but only if the handler is giving the treats. Maybe they say the students cannot give the treats. So just finding out some specifics about those. And then I mentioned HABIC does have a specific way that we give treats. So we always have people use a flat open hand. And so they put the treat on the flat open hand. The dog waits for it, and then they're able to take it when they're released with an okay or a free or whatever. The student can say, good dog, now you can take it, whatever that release word is. So again, there might just be specific ways that the organizations do things like that. Requirements for leashes. So we'll see a really great example of this in one of our later examples, but there might be different requirements for leashes, whether that's the leash length. Some organizations will specify, 6-foot leash or a 4-foot leash or a very specific leash length. Similarly, there might be a specific vest or bandana or harness or equipment that the dog is going to be wearing when they come into that intervention. And then what you'll see later is an example of a double leashing protocol that we have at HABIC. So we never turn the leash completely over to the student. The handler always has the leash, but you'll see how we end up using 2 leashes so the student can still walk the dog and then the handler still ultimately has control of the dog. And we just put that in place as a safety. You never know when you're going to see a squirrel or a cheeseburger or something that dog might, really try to pull towards and get to. And then another good thing to ask about is, are there any additional policies around minors? HABIC, being a part of Colorado State University, has pretty strict requirements about the volunteers never being alone with the minors. And so we're working very closely with the school professionals or educators, and that educator is always in the room with the volunteer team and the student. And so this also has some limitations. It means things like the volunteer and the dog wouldn't go collect a student from the classroom and bring them back to where you're doing the intervention. You might just leave the handler and the dog in the room, and then the educator would go get the student and bring the student in. So just knowing some of those pieces.
All right, so one of the things that I like to do is conduct an on-site, and I call it an interview, but we've got so many different teams with all these different organizations, and some like Pet Partners will test every 2 years. Some organizations don't. So I really like to see the dog in that environment before I say, oh yes, we'd love to have you come in every Thursday for the next 6 months at 2 o'clock or something like that. So here's some things that I look for is just finding out when the handler is available. I've had people come in and say, well, we're available on the weekends. And I say, well, our school's closed on the weekends. So just kind of keeping in mind, is this going to even work with your schedule? Can they identify their dog's potential stress signals? So I'll ask, like, if your dog's starting to become uncomfortable with a situation, how do you know? And then I really look for them to provide that information so that, number one, that I know it also, but that I also know that if our intervention is starting to get kind of uncomfortable for that dog, that handler knows that piece.
And I know from the animal training side of things, oftentimes people will say, you know, my dog never gets stressed, and it's almost like a trick question. So usually the answer we're looking for is something about, you know, like those subtle lip licks, or they give you that special look, or they start to pull towards the door, but really trying to kind of dig in and make sure that people do know some of those stress signs.
Okay, and I also want to make sure that handlers know the strengths of their dogs, because again, I'm trying to match those students up with particular teams. So I ask, like, what does your dog like doing? What kind of games do you play together? Because then I can add that into the intervention also. What age do they like interacting with? We had a wonderful golden retriever who worked with me in an elementary school, and he liked first grade and up, and he would interact with those first graders all the way up to 5th grade. We did some work in the middle school, high school, love them. Kindergarten, yeah, he's not big on kindergartners. So we didn't do very many interactions with kindergartners. I really wanted to respect his preference with that. How they like to play. A lot of our interventions are play-based. So if they have a favorite ball, we had a little Chihuahua mixed bug who has different colored tiny little balls that she loves to play with, and we would interweave those into the intervention so that she was having fun here at school. Okay, I'd like to know how much experience they've had as a team and maybe where they've had that experience. If this is a dog who has done some wonderful things in hospice, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to love school. So I want to kind of see, do they have any experience working in a school setting, or is it different settings? Because dogs have preferences on where they would like to work. And then knowing that handler's background. So if they're telling me, oh yes, I was a social worker, and I'm like, oh yes, let's see if we can get this mixed. Or if I'm looking for reading interventions and they say, oh, I was a first grade teacher for 15 years, after moving from a different grade level, then I'm like, oh, then this handler has a lot of skills that we could utilize, and that they can really be thinking about how their dog can help in this intervention. And then, does the handler like kids? So after COVID, things had all shut down and our school was just starting to open up. We got approval for therapy dogs to come back in the buildings for mental health interventions. And a lot of the other places that these dogs had been volunteering at had closed down. So I got contacted by a lot of teams. Had one team come in and we're having this discussion, and I'm like, well, what's your favorite age group to work with? And they just looked at me and they said, well, I don't like kids. I just want my dog to have some therapy, to be able to do some therapy work. And I said, okay, well, it was really nice meeting you, but I don't think this is going to be a good match. So we're looking at both the handler and the dog to see if that team together is a great match for the particular setting that you're in. Okay, I like to share school material. So I'd like to give them a calendar, communicate with them on how to contact me. So if there's a big snowstorm, or if their dog threw up that morning, whatever it may be, that they have someone to reach out to. If the students that they're working with, if I look at my attendance list and they're all, gone for that day, then I may make a phone call and say, we've got this particular thing going on at school, so it might not work out today. And then just our onboarding process. So For our volunteers, we do background checks. We have them do a statement of confidentiality. So those two things would help get them through that background check before they could work in the school or volunteer in the school setting. Some other things that we collect are for our risk management. We want to make sure that their registration with their therapy dog organization is up to date. So, you know, if they're, you know, presenting a card from HABIC, but it's the dates on it are going back a couple years and they're not falling within the correct date range, then I may say, well, we need to get up some updated paperwork. So it needs to be it needs to be up to date. We need to have their insurance on file with our risk management department. Otherwise, I get a call from Dorothy in risk management and saying, get that insurance paperwork to me. And then we actually sign a contract with each team. And one of the big things on that contract is that that handler has the right to end that session early if that dog is uncomfortable and we can't change that environment to help that dog. I have the right to end a session. The student has the right to end a session. The dog has the right to end that session. If something is not going right, we want to press pause and we want to fix it. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to wrap things up and go back to the drawing table and try to figure out what is going on so that everyone is feeling comfortable at those sessions. Okay, now we're going to move into our intervention planning. So we've got our teams, they're great teams. And we're going to look at, you know, lining them up with students and really how do we plan for these interventions when we have a volunteer working with us. So I'm going to touch base with the handler and I'm going to help them understand in general what the students' goals are. Are we working on emotional regulation goals? Are we working on attention and focus goals? And then the handler hopefully is going to make some suggestions on, oh, my dog likes to play this game. What if we played this game to help meet this particular goal? So I'm looking for input from that handler as we're building the intervention. And in this case, we're going to watch a video that really kind of walks through what this could look like. Thank you so much for coming to our school today, and it's wonderful to meet you and Winnie. And I wanted to just ask a couple questions because what I love doing is seeing what your team's strengths are and then lining them up with the goals that some of our students have at school. And I was kind of reading through the information that you had here. I really appreciate you filling out this form. And you had mentioned on here that Winnie loves going for walks.
She does.
Okay.
Yeah, we have walked miles and miles together. It's just something that, you know, I took her through obedience and she learned to walk on a leash and she's just a great walker.
So one of the students we're going to be working with today has an empathy goal. And so we really want to have that student interacting with Winnie in a way that kind of shows Winnie that she's caring for Winnie, that she values how Winnie feels in the situation. So I was thinking about just seeing Winnie drinking water on this warm day, that maybe she could offer to get Winnie a drink. And so we'll want to empty our bowl before we start our intervention. But then the second one I was wondering about, since it's we're going to be having some new students this year, I'm wondering if we could take a look at going for a walk and build on the skill sets of just introducing somebody to a new setting and see how the student does with just kind of their conversation and ability to really let someone else kind of lead where we're going and take guidance from others. Does that sound like something that you and Winnie would enjoy?
I think that sounds like a fantastic idea because Winnie does like to walk, and this being a new setting, you know, while she's pretty adaptable, it's still, as we all get fearful when we enter someplace new. So to have somebody, a friend, lead us, to kind of tell us about it, use a kind voice, it just makes us feel that we kind of fit in and we're going to be able to do this. So I think it's a fantastic way to do empathy and something to capitalize on something that Winnie loves to do.
The other student is working on regulation skills. So we use a program called Zones of Regulation. And when we're in a green zone, that means we're ready to learn. So our bodies are calm, our minds are able to think clearly. But sometimes during the school day, things kind of get a little silly, or we kind of get a little restless, and that's more of the yellow zone. So I'm wondering, does Winnie have something that maybe could help us get a little bit into the yellow zone, like maybe a little game to play where we might laugh a little bit, that has a little bit of movement with it that she enjoys?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Winnie doesn't have a lot of tricks and a lot of games, but one that she does enjoy is just using 3 cups. You put a treat under one of them, and she loves cookies, so that's a good thing. And then the student just moves the 3 cups around to kind of fool Winnie where the treat is or the cookie is, and then let Winnie find it. Because, you know, dogs have such great noses anyway.
Yes.
So, and sometimes it does cause people to kind of giggle because she's trying to, you know, nudge it over and just trying to find it. So I think that would be a good one.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Whitney, would you like that? Yeah? Okay. And then to get back into green zone, we'll just do a breathing exercise, and I'd like to see if the student could lead that. So we'll give them some space to kind of maybe teach us what breathing exercise they'd like to use. Awesome. And then for closing, I'd like to have just some little, just a little something that we'll do every week to kind of close out. Some things are like if dogs like kind of have a wave goodbye or giving a treat. Is there something that you think Winnie would appreciate and like as a closing?
Well, knowing Winnie, who loves cookies, a cookie would be great.
We'll plan on that then. Do you have any questions before we get started?
No, I'm just looking forward to working with the students very much.
Great. Thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so just to jump in here real quick, watching this video, oh my gosh, Winnie's such a great dog there, and her handler is amazing too. These intervention planning meetings, before I start like an 8-week intervention, it might be, I might schedule like 10 or 15 minutes with that team to kind of say, here's the broad view of what we're focusing on. But then each week, we're going to spend just a couple minutes talking about, okay, this is what we're working on. Here's what we can be doing to reach this goal. And here's the different flow. We'll go through the flow of the session, and Kate's going to share how that flow really works within this diamond model.
Yeah, so we came up with this little kind of infographic to walk through what the flow of a typical session might look like, starting with an introduction, and then there's a working portion of the session, and then a closure. We're going to dive a lot more into this in a couple video examples later on. But the thing I like to point out here is that we very intentionally used this sort of flowing road with a lot of curves and detours because it's really doesn't tend to unfold as this really strict, like we are doing the introduction now, and now we're doing the working. The closure might be a little bit more formalized, but it really does all kind of flow together. It's not sort of this regimented thing. So that's just what I wanted to point out here. And then, like I said, we'll see some more examples of this.
Okay, so now we're going to jump into actually conducting this intervention. So we want to start with just thinking about who are we selecting for these interventions. And really, now as I'm looking at these, the slides, this can even be prior to that, that pre-model, that pre-meeting model, because you really need to know who you're working with and their goals. But as far as like selecting your clients, just looking at those allergies and aversions, we did have some parents that said we really want our student to work with the dog, but he's allergic. So they worked with the allergist, we moved the room, we didn't have any physical contact, and the intervention went beautifully. So even if there are indications like this, it might be worth just asking another question or two if either the student or the family, or ideally both, are really interested in trying to make that work. We look at prior experience with animals. Do they have any pets at home? Has there been any negative experiences with animals? Either an animal harming a child or a child harming an animal. And then, do they want to work with a dog? I've had some students who are like, you know what, dogs are okay, but I'd rather be doing something different. And I'm like, okay, that lets me know animal-assisted interventions might not be the greatest fit for you. And then, especially in school, just scheduling. That oftentimes is our big hurdle, aligning that volunteer schedule with the student schedule and when we're able to actually pull them out of the classroom to work on those specific skills. So once we've kind of have our students selected, then we're going to go into a little bit more of an evaluation. Sometimes what I like to do is just see how the dog and the animal respond to each other. So I might have the team come in and just we'll go for a quick walk, totally separate from interventions. And I'm looking for, does the student physically interact with the dog? Does the dog, engage with the student? Is the student hiding behind me and not wanting to interact? Does the student actually talk to the handler who's a stranger and maybe ask questions or even share experiences that they've had with the dog? That to me indicates that we might have a really good bond. And I have a hypothesis that the stronger the bond, the more growth that we're going to make, or the faster growth that we're going to make. Okay, and then I want to educate the student. So the student needs to know their behavior expectations. We have a approach, ask, pet, goodbye. So when do we approach? How do we approach a dog? How do we ask the handler and then the dog for an interaction? Petting, what kind of petting does that dog like best? Do they like under the chin or behind the ears or that butt scratch sort of thing? And then goodbye is more when we're in the school setting, and we might have, like a number of kids at the drinking fountain that just want a quick interaction. So being able to say goodbye so that the next person could have a turn. So we have those behavior expectations, but then we want them to learn things specific to that therapy dog, such as those body signals and building that communication. So they're asking the dog for something. Is the dog asking them for anything back? And do the two understand each other at all? So really building that knowledge for the student.
Sorry, my mute button was absolutely refusing to unmute, but we got there. So as I said, we're coming back into the sort of flow of the typical session. So now we're going to dive into some actual video examples similar to the introduction video that you saw, kind of taking this piece by piece. So to start off with, we're going to take a closer look at what the introduction might look like. So encouraging appropriate greeting, and then a little bit at that setup, which sort of happened off camera, but you heard in the pre-meeting, Jen was mentioning, like, let's make sure the bowl of water is empty for Winnie, and then that gives the student an opportunity to go fill the water for the dog. So getting all that set up, and we'll see a quick example of what this looks like.
Winnie can move into the yellow zone, and then if we can help her move back into green zone. Would you be willing to work with her on that? All right, that sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started.
And what I didn't mention there too is that just a quick recap of what goal the student is specifically working on, and just kind of going back to like, hey, this is what we're actually doing today is really good too. And then the working portion of the session. So this is going to take up the majority of the session. And again, this is flowing. It doesn't have to be really regimented. Oftentimes what'll happen is the handler will demonstrate whatever skill it is that the dog is doing, whether that's the cups game that you'll see, or maybe it's a recall with the dog. So this is how you tell the dog to sit and how you tell the dog to wait. So the handler can demonstrate what all those things look like. The student gets to give it a try. And then throughout this entire thing, that educator is really connecting the skills that they're working on through the intervention back to those goals that you set up at the beginning. So this is going to be our first example, and this is working on that zones of regulation goal.
What we're going to do today for our activity is we're going to play a fun game with Winnie, and it's going to be so much fun that we might start like giggling and laughing and kind of moving around a little bit and get a little bit into the yellow zone. We're going to be watching Winnie to see if she gets in the yellow zone with us. And then when we're done with the game, we're going to do some of our breathing exercises with Winnie, and we'll see if all of us can get back into the green zone. Does that sound good? Now, do you have any idea at all how to play this cup game? I don't think so either. Who would know? Would Miss Kathy know? Yeah? Okay, so let's watch Miss Kathy and figure out how to play this game.
So what we have is we've got Winnie, our dog, and we've got 3 cups. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them on the ground. Winnie, can you sit? Can you sit? Can you sit? It's a good girl. Stay. Stay. So we're going to put the cups on the ground, and I've got some cookies in my pocket.
No.
And what we're going to do is we are going to put a cookie under one of the cups. And then you're going to just take them and kind of move them around. Just however you want to do it, just kind of, just like that. And then we're going to tell Winnie, find the cup, find the cookie, find the cookie. Come on, find it, Winnie.
Come on, Winnie, you can do it, Winnie. Come on. Come on, Winnie. She's like, it's stuck. Oh, she got it. Yay!
See how she does that? How do you think she finds the cookie?
By her nose.
By her excellent nose, exactly. And so she likes to play that game. Would you like to set it up now? Yeah, why don't you do that? And I'll give you a cookie here. When you come back by me. She's watching carefully. She thinks, oh, this is pretty tricky. Mariah is more tricky than you were, Mom. Oh, wow.
Oh, you can do it. You can do it. Go, Winnie, go. Come on, Winnie. Come on, Winnie. Oh, you missed it. Winnie, find it. Find it.
Yay!
Oh,
She
yay.
found it. Good job, Mariah. You did it just right. You set it up really good for her. You set it up really good for her.
Yeah, so do you think Winnie's getting a little bit in the yellow zone? Is she moving around a little bit more? What do you think is going on in her brain? Would she be ready to learn in the classroom, or is she like cookie focus?
Cookie focus.
Cookie focus. So could we help her get back into green zone? How do you think we could do that with our slow breathing?
You could probably like do this smelling
Oh, do you want to do that with her? Okay, so I want you to look at her and see, can you tell how fast or slower by listening? Can you tell how fast or slow she's breathing? Okay. So now we're going to show, Miss Kathy, have you ever done soup breathing or pizza breaths?
No.
Oh,
I
all
want to
right.
learn how.
Do you want to tell her how to do those?
yeah, and there's like another way that I do at my house too. It's like the same thing.
Okay, well, why don't you teach all of us?
Yeah. So the way that I do it at home is you smell the flowers and blow out the candles.
Oh,
that sounds like a
okay.
good plan. So we're smelling the flowers. Probably blow it out nice and slow.
Nice and slow, yeah. Do you think Winnie likes smelling the candle or smelling flowers, or what do you think Winnie would imagine smelling?
A cookie.
A cookie. Could we all imagine to smell a cookie?
So you smell a hot cookie and then you blow it.
Oh, Should we do 3 of those cookie breaths? Winnie cookie breaths. Are you ready? Do you think she's gone more towards green zone? Yeah, I would think so.
She's slowing her breathing down.
You think so? Good job, Winnie. And Mariah, thank you for teaching us Winnie cookie breaths. Nice work.
Okay, so then we have another example with Eden, and this is working towards an empathy goal.
All right, Eden, we have a goal today. We have our wonderful team here, Miss Kathy and Winnie, and they really haven't explored our school very much. Do you think if somebody's brand new to a building, they might be more comfortable if they had a chance to look around with a friend? Yeah? So would you like to be our tour guide for Miss Winnie and let her walk around and sniff so she's more comfortable? Okay, what could you do besides just walking with her to help her feel more comfortable at school?
Like, tell her where she is and what it is.
Yeah, and using a nice kind voice. Yeah, that sounds, could you give her any compliments?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I think this is gonna work out great. How do you think we walk a dog at school? Who could we ask?
Miss Kathy.
Yeah, do you wanna ask her?
I think that's a great idea, Miss V. I think Winnie really loves to explore. She likes to see what her environment is. And a dog has such a good nose anyway, so they're just always exploring with it. So I'm going to give you the red leash, okay? And I'm just going to attach this purple one. And I'm just going to kind of walk along, but I'm going to let you kind of be in charge. I'm going to let you tell her things. Do you want to come on this side over here? Yeah. Even for me? And let you be in charge of telling her where we are and what we're seeing. And I just like that idea of the calm voice. Winnie's doing a little bit of a dance right now.
Dance too?
So these are the chairs. So when you come to school, you can sit on it because you don't want to get bored walking. And then you get desks. And then there's pictures and books.
Do you have some favorite books that you like to look at when you're in school?
Yeah, I like Willie Wishers and Dogman and
Those sound like good ones.
yeah.
Oh, I really like how you're petting her. Oh, that makes her feel really safe because she knows that you're taking really good care of her in a strange place. Yeah, so this is good. Did you have anything else you want to show her in this room? What's over hanging over? What are all those things?
Those are materials.
It's like a lot of fun colors and markers and stuff. I love markers. Do you like markers?
Yeah.
Oh, they're pretty fun.
And some glitter glue.
Well, all the teachers need lots of binders too.
Yeah.
All the important information that they're trying to help you learn. I was going to say, you know, when we first came, she was a little bit afraid because you know how when you have to go someplace new, it's all new and big and sometimes a little bit scary. But you just made her feel so safe and you were so kind to her. So we really think that that was really great that you did that for her.
And you know what I see? She keeps looking up at you. I think you've made a brand new friend there, Eden. Yeah, nice job. Eden, I'm reading some dog signals here. Do you think Miss Kathy can tell us maybe what some dog signals are? That
Shows that that's her goal. And can you kind of hear what is she doing?
Panting.
Panting. And sometimes when dogs pant, actually what they're trying to do is cool themselves. And so water helps cool themselves. So she would really appreciate a drink of water.
Okay, I can get some for you.
Yes. And do you think then Winnie would probably feel more comfortable?
Okay. Oh, she's gonna love me some water.
Do you want to put it in a place where she's not going to spill it, or do you want to put it down or just, Winnie, just sit down. There you go, buddy. Okay. Look at Winnie. Oh, She really appreciates it. We did such a good job getting her water.
What does she sound like when she's drinking?
Probably like when you throw a rock.
Oh, yeah.
Lapping sound, isn't it? Oh, she really liked that water.
She's like, thank you, Eden.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Should we move this out of the way so we don't spill it? Yeah, where should we put it so that she could still get water if she wanted it?
Put it in this corner.
That's a great idea.
What a good idea.
Right?
Oh, perfect.
Thanks, Eden. Nice work.
Right, so those were two different examples of what that working session could look like. And again, it can really take the form so many different ways, but hopefully that just gives a little bit of an example of how that works and feels. And then the closure. So as Jen mentioned in that initial meeting with the teams there, having some sort of consistent closure. So whether that's, dogs that do a little dance or wave goodbye, or in Winnie's case, they're going to be giving her a cookie. And then this is also a really nice chance to recap those goals and really make sure those goals are being connected back for the student and what they were doing that day.
All right, you guys, so we worked on 2 goals today. Mariah, you worked on your zones goal. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did to help us move back into green?
I helped Minata and Winnie get back to the green zone by getting some slow breaths.
And what kind of slow breaths did your brilliant mind come up with?
Cookie breaths.
Cookie breaths. Do you think that Winnie might like to have a cookie from you just as a goodbye for today? Yeah?
I got a pocket full right here. Let me come over by you and just have a flat hand. And when you're ready to have her have it, you tell her okay, because she'll look at you. Never look at you. She's looking you in the eye. You tell her it's okay. Okay. Good job, Mariah. Good job.
All right, and Eden, we were working on our empathy goals today. Can you tell me, did you have any acts of kindness with beautiful Winnie today?
I made him feel comfortable by showing him around.
Mm-hmm. And what else did you do?
I gave water to him.
Nice. And how do you think that made Winnie feel?
It made him feel good and appreciated.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that.
That's a nice word to use, yeah.
All right. Would you like to give a goodbye cookie to Winnie?
Do you know how to give a cookie by in your flat hand too? Winnie, have her just look at it. Have her look you in the eye. Winnie, Winnie. Winnie. Okay. No. That wasn't. There. Now have her look at you.
Okay.
Good job. Good job.
Nice
Very
work,
good.
you guys.
Very good work.
Okay, and we'll plan for us to get together next week, okay? Okay.
And then I'm going to turn it back over to Jen.
All right, so after we've had our, maybe this is an 8-week intervention where a student comes in and works with a volunteer team for a half hour once a week. So 8 weeks later, we're going to see, did this change anything? So what I like to do is I like to do a pre and a post just evaluation of data. And some things that I look with are their, especially for academic goals, their fluency or reading comprehension. We've even worked on math skills before, but teachers have a whole slew of ways to evaluate if there's been improvement on an academic goal. So we want to look pre-post. Has there been an improvement? We can do that with attendance goals. We can do that with behavior data like office referrals, mentor programs like check-in, check-out, even just basic observations. I have a quick pre-post form that I ask teachers to fill out on more of our social emotional learning. So observations within the classrooms and have they seen a change? And we'll at times have parents fill that out too. Are we seeing changes at home off of this intervention? So we want to gather all that data. And then once we have this fabulous data, we want to share the data. So this is one way to really create some great growth in your program, is if you're starting with one volunteer team and they're working with 2 students, and you can share in general the improvements of those 2 students, all of a sudden you start getting more and more requests, and that's how programs can build in a healthy manner. So we'll share the data with the teachers that were involved, with those parents and guardians, and at times even ask for them to participate in part of that gathering of data. We share the data with the student. Yeah, so before you started working with Winnie, this is the data that we collected, but boy, look at after you've been working with Winnie for 8 weeks, look at how far you've come, and celebrating that. And then we also want to share this very generalized data, so without releasing any confidential information, but letting the handler know, did this work? So that if they're going to other schools or working with other professionals, they can come back and say, oh, well, hey, at this school, I was working with a student with these goals, and this is what we did, and the data showed that they were making some good improvements. So very informal, but letting them know whether the intervention worked or not. And then at the end of each session, I also want to check out with the handler to see what is their perception of how things went. And then this also gives us a little opportunity to plan for the next week if there's ongoing sessions. But here's an example.
Thanks so much for coming today. I wanted to just get a little bit of information on your way out. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this was the worst intervention that she's ever been a part of, and 10 being this is like the best time that she's had, what number would you give Winnie for today?
I'd give it a 10.
A 10?
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
like there was a lot of good things that happened. I think she felt the comfort, and yet I think she felt like she fit in with the interventions with what we were trying to do with the girls.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And how about you? Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it very much.
Great.
Very much.
Okay. Any time that you felt like maybe that was too much of an activity, or that she was maybe uncomfortable or confused with anything that was going on?
I don't really think that. I just think towards the end of the session, she just gets a little tired.
Okay.
And so, that's when, as you said, sometimes when we kind of wind down and do that closure, that's a really good thing to do, because then she kind of knows that she can start really, really winding down too.
Okay.
And closure's good.
And so if you notice that in a future session that she's starting to wind down, just let me know, and then maybe we could move to that kind of that closure a little bit sooner for her.
Sure.
Okay.
That sounds wonderful.
Awesome. And then we're going to continue with the regulation for next week. So if you want to think about any ideas of like moving from
See if there's
yellow
anything
back
that
to
we could do.
green.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be wonderful.
All right, we'll see you next week then. Thanks
I'll
again.
be looking forward to it. Winnie and I like it.
All
So,
right.
Thank you.
Bye, Winnie. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, and I just have to take a moment here and celebrate how fantastic it was for Miss Kathy and Winnie to come in the middle of summer. So this is not while school is in session. And one of our, or 2 of our students, Mariah and Eden, for coming in and volunteering during their summer break to film these interactions for you. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this and have gotten a lot of information from it. A lot of this information is in a peer-reviewed article from the Journal of School Counseling. So the full text is here. It's Pathways for Implementing a School Therapy Dog Program. And so if you have any questions, please take a look at that. And thank you very much for listening with us and learning. Kate, do you have any final comments?
I don't think so. I just always appreciate being able to chat with you and sharing in that knowledge. And I'm thinking about that summer day too. It was a really hot day in the middle of the summer, and I'm hiding behind the camera, and it was a lot of fun. And I do want to thank you too for coming in on a summer day and, doing all this fantastic work even when it's not the school year.
Right. And thank you, AAA IP, for the opportunity to share this information with others. I hope everybody has a great day. Bye.